David.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the organizer. And for today, I will talk about this project, basically the last result in the last 3 years. And the results come from my PhD thesis and the PhD thesis of Ana Luisa González-Morán under supervision of Professor Roberto Terlevich, Elena Terlevich, and Manolis Plionis. This is other collaborators from other institutions. Okay, this is basically a picture general about our universe, and basically given by the equation, the Einstein field equation, and the metric of the space-time, and then it's possible to parameterize in terms of the density of the energy of the universe, and we can get, for example, the dark energy, and this is an interesting problem, how to quantify these quantities from the observation, and probably to explore the dark energy equation of the state, if these have any evolution with the time or not. And basically we have a general picture, and now we are living in a dark energy accelerated expansion, and we have basically from the observation we know about the component of the universe, basically dark energy, dark matter, and only 5% of the baryonic matter. And then the goal of this is that from the observation, basically we have 3 very good experiments from the supernovae, from the baryonic acoustic oscillation, and from the CMB. With this observation has been possible to constrain the cosmological parameters based on the lambda CDM, for example, and we can see here that it's possible for individual experiments. We have a lot of degeneration in the solution, and then it's more interesting to combine the different experiments to obtain a better constraint of these parameters. And now there are a growing tension related to the Hubble constant derived from the CMB and measured from the supernovae. And then we can see basically the growing tension around the different GHIIRs. And now the more recent results using TRGV for the distance to the galaxies, basically the anchor sample of the supernovae. And we can see how this is open the possibility to explore for systematic effects in the measurement, or on the other hand, this is the question if there are new physics related to this tension. And here basically we can see the different results, and probably it's possible to get a better constraint with the other experiment. In this way, has been shown that the using different cosmological parameters and different cosmological models, is possible to see that the differential distance modulus predicted by these models, than for redshift lower than 1, is more difficult to constrain the parameters because there are a lot of the generations between the models. And one possible is to reduce the observational errors, but it is very difficult. And on the other hand, the alternative is to use tracer of high redshift. In this case, the degeneration between the models is possible to break because the differential distance modulus predicted by models is larger. This is, for example, the work of Plionis and collaborators, and we can see, for example, the comparison between the differential distance modulus with regarding the fiducial model with lambda CDM, with W-1 and omega matter 0.72. And we can see how increase the tracer of high redshift is possible to break the degeneration between the models. And then the motivation is to use giant H2 regions and H2 galaxies for this task. In this case, here I show basically it's possible to use these objects because they followed a correlation between the velocity dispersion and the luminosity of the Balmer lines from the giant H2 regions, which distance can be calibrated by primary indicators like C-phase or TRGV. And then this correlation also is followed by local H2 galaxies and high redshift H2 galaxies. Here we can see the empirical correlation. The physics of this correlation is still under research because so far is I talk only about the use of this empirical correlation. Now, 1H2 galaxy is basically a massive burst of star forming. The spectra is characterized by a strong emission line with very low contamination of the continuum. So it's similar the giant H2 star-galactic H2 regions and the H2 galaxies. Here there are two examples. This is MGC 604 in M33, and this is 1/18. Basically, we can see the spectra are similar, and these objects are very compact. H2 galaxies are very compact, and this is the distribution of the galaxies in the star-forming galaxies in the BPT diagram. And basically, H2 galaxies are located in the zone of high ionization and low metallicity. And if we think that's like a metallicity sequence, the H2 galaxies are the most poor metallicity H2 galaxy. This can be selected using the equivalent width in the Balmer lines. For example, H beta greater than 50 angstrom. This is in order to get an upper limit in the age of the burst around 5-6 million years and reduce the contamination by an older stellar population. Here we can see a basic simulation of the single burst using a sort of 99, and basically the objects are located in this zone. This is the H2 galaxies, and also apply for the giant extragalactic H2 regions. Now we need two kind of observation: low resolution in order to measure the fluxes, and high resolution spectroscopy to measure the velocity dispersion. This can be done selecting the H2 galaxies from the SDSS and observe the high resolution with large telescope like BLT, Subaru, and Keck. On the other hand, the fluxes can be measured from the small telescope. This applies for the local H2 galaxies. And this is basically a cartoon about the methodology. We have the H2 galaxies, and for any arbitrary value of Hubble constant, we can get a good constraint about the slope of this relation, and using, for example, here in green, the giant extragalactic H2 region for which the distance are independent of the Hubble constant. And then with this information, we can construct the distance indicator, and we can get the observed distance modulus. Basically, we can make a minimization process in order to get the cosmological parameter, or in this case, for example, in particular, the value of the Hubble constant by means of minimization chi-square. And this is the idea about the behind of the methodology. And then this is the results in the case of the Hubble constant for the local giant H2 region. More details can you see in the poster. And basically, we have been analyzing a lot of systematic effects that are affecting the L sigma relation, and therefore this is translated to the different values of the Hubble constant. And here we present the last results of the different calibration using different anchor sample for supernovae, and our value of the Hubble constant obtained using the L sigma relation. Still, the errors are larger, but it's possible to improve in the future. Now, for the high redshift galaxies, it's possible to use infrared spectrograph like KMOS in BLT and Keck in MOS5. These allow to observe H2 galaxies selected by the same equivalent width, basically the same criteria. We can observe H2 galaxies between redshift 1.3 and 2.6, and basically this is how we can see the H2 galaxy at high redshift is very similar, are very compact, and this is basically the profile that allow to measure the velocity dispersion. And with this information, it's possible to construct the Hubble diagram for H2 galaxies that come from the giant H2 regions in the local universe. This is the distance independent of the cosmology, or independent of the Hubble constant, and the local H2 galaxies given by the distance indicator, and high redshift galaxies. Basically, we have the Hubble diagram. Still, we have a gap between intermediate redshift, and we are working on that. And now we are using multi-nest Bayesian inference in order to get a minimized Frit parameter at the same time. And here is basically the cosmological parameters, and we have also the parameter related with the distance indicator. Basically, the distance indicator is given by the correlation between sigma, the velocity dispersion, and the luminosity. And here we have the, for example, the 0 point given by the ionized regions, and the beta given by the slope of the relation. This is also have a physical meaning, but we need to explore in more detail. With this information, then we can constrain the omega matter and different planes of the cosmological parameter, for example, omega matter and H0, basically the normalized Hubble constant. And we can see how we can increase some more data at high redshift. Then it's possible to get a better constraint in the contours and reduce this. This is basically the 1 sigma and 2 sigma errors. And then we have a better constraint in this case. Here we can see the result for omega matter, for example, and we can see how we can reduce and still on the results given by other tracers like supernovae, for example. Now, this is only for including after a factorization of the Hubble constant, and then we can constrain W0 and omega matter, in this case for the model of the dark energy. And we can see this is basically, again, the contours 1 sigma and 2 sigma. And we can see here basically for individual distribution, and the other constraint, for example, is very competitive with supernovae, because how I can show before, is better to get a tracer a higher redshift. And this is also joint analyzed with the H2 galaxies with the CMB and baryonic acoustic oscillation. Here we can see in green baryonic acoustic oscillation, in blue the CMB, and in red the H2 galaxies. Still, we have a large error compared to supernovae, but we can see that when we are combined, we can reduce the contours for the different experiments. And this is a comparison between, for example, using only H2 galaxies at high redshift, and in this case, using supernovae. We can see that still we need to improve this, but we are comparing only for H2 galaxies around 100 of targets, whereas the supernovae are thousands of targets. And then it's possible to improve in the future. And this is also for the joint analyze, but including, for example, W0, omega matter again, and using H2 galaxies, CMB and BAO, and supernovae, CMB and BAO. We can see that for the different experiments, still we are on the way to be competitive with the supernovae. And this is also a parameterization in terms of the evolution of the dark energy equation of the state. And also still we have a large degeneration, but this can be improved in the future with the new observation. Basically, this is very fast the conclusion. We present constraint to the value of the H0 from a sample of local giant H2 region and H2 galaxies. And the results agree with the local determination from supernovae. Another conclusion, the study of the Young system, because remember that the limit in the age is around 5 million years. This also is not only important for the cosmology, but also to study the star formation, local universe, and the high redshift universe. Now we present the constraint to the parameter of the dark energy equation of the state. And in the future, this is we have the expectation of around 500 high redshift galaxies. This can be done using integral field spectroscopy, especially, or including multi-object spectroscopy in the infrared data. This is the main reference that you can check for this work related to this project, an alternative to tracers of the Hubble expansion. And this is a work in progress and future. Basically, we are taking observation with the a MIR instrument and Megara instrument and the GTC in order to fill the gap between local H2 galaxies and high redshift galaxies to get a better constraint about the Hubble constant. And this can be done like a multi-object spectrograph. Also, we are using Megara IFU, is the same, in particular cases for the local H2 galaxies in order to analyze the properties of these objects and understand the physics behind of the L sigma relation of this correlation, and also to analyze.
Thank you, David. We are almost in time.
Okay. And in the future, using James Webb to get even further.
Okay. We thanks David for this presentation.
Thank you.
We will take some questions.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for your talk. That was good. I enjoyed it a lot. I was wondering if you can comment on the mass range of these H2 galaxies, and also is rotation negligible on this type of object for your test?
Yes. For example, the mass is around 10 to 9 solar masses. It's very low. Galaxies of low mass, and this is a component important about the rotation because it's possible to see, for example, forming this in early stage. But in the local sample, we are cleaning this object that show profiles indicating rotation or multiple components, because this correlation is very well followed by profiles that show Gaussian profiles, because the multiple components in the profile or signatures of rotation basically show more scatter in this relation, probably because other effects, not only gravity, because the idea about this correlation is the gravity is the main scenario to broaden the emission line.
We thanks David again, and we will go with the next talk, which from
okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. The next talk is by Giovanni Arico.
Yes.
About cosmology with baryons using emulator, I guess. Please go ahead, Giovanni.
Thank you very much. Thanks. I'm Giovanni Rico. I'm a postdoc at the University of Zurich. I'd like, first of all, to thank the organizer. It's great to be virtually there, and I hope in some of the next edition to be able to join you physically there in Cordoba. So today I'd like to speak about the baryonic effects on the large-scale structure of the universe. How can we quantify these baryonic effects and why they are important? So baryons, if we take the large-scale structure of the universe, at very large scales, gravity is dominant. So baryonic effects are negligible. But if we go to smaller scale, then the gas pressure. Yep. You cannot see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So if we go to smaller scales, astrophysical effects, for instance, the cooling of the gas, the galaxy formation, AGN feedback are no longer negligible, and we need to take into account them. We can, for instance, quantify them by running a pair of simulation. One hydrodynamical simulation, so like with all these baryonic physics and astrophysical processes, and a twin simulation where all the hydrodynamic is switched off, so just gravity only or dark matter only, and compare them. So we run these two simulations and we measure their matter power spectrum, and we take the ratio. And this plot is showing the prediction of different codes and different group works about this difference in clustering. And as you can see, different hydrodynamical simulations predict very different baryonic effects. So at large scales, so at the left part of this plot, since we are in Fourier space, these are all converging to one. So gravity and hydrodynamical simulation agree perfectly. But at a smaller scale, we have that qualitatively like similar shape of these baryonic effects, but quantitatively very different outputs. So these are difference in more than 50, 60%. As you can see, there is like a suppression at medium scales given by the gas that is pushed away from halos, and an enhancement of the power spectrum that is very small, smaller scales given by the galaxy formations. And but to know really the impact of these baryon effects is important, for instance, for weak lensing surveys. As Marianne already introduced, these weak lensing surveys measure directly the impact of all the matter, not a biased tracers, but just all the matter that is integrated. For instance, if we assume that the galaxy shapes are uncorrelated in the skies or are just randomly oriented, we can expect that there will be a given correlation caused by the large scale structure. So like we observe very far galaxies and the light is distorted by the potential of the large scale structure. And this introduces a tiny correlation of 1% signal that we still can measure and infer some cosmological parameters, for instance, the dark energy equational state, or the amplitude of fluctuations, or the quantity, the density of matter in the universe. So this is a very important cosmological probe, and the correlation of the shape of this galaxy, as you can see in this equation, is equal to the integral in redshift or comoving distances, or some kind of lensing kernel, there is just a geometrical factor, times the power spectrum of the matter. So all the matter is intervening in this kind of calculations. And if we see the correlation, we can even do a tomographic approach, so get different redshift beams and cross-correlate them, and we get some signal as this one in this plot that is from the dark energy survey collaborations. And we see like that we have this galaxy shape correlation in different redshift beams. But the problem is that in this power spectrum are intervening also baryons, and we really don't know what is their effects. And as a matter of fact, in the dark energy survey measurements, like all these gray bands here are like the part of data that is thrown away from the collaboration because of the impossibility of modeling these baryonic effects. So a large fraction of data is currently not used because of theoretical reasons. So we cannot really model them. And therefore, it's very important to come up with some kind of modeling to be able to exploit this data. And for future surveys, this is going to be even more dramatic, since Euclid or LST are planned to have very precise measurements, and they plan to get the dark energy equational state with an accuracy of 1%. And therefore, we need to have a matter power spectrum precise to 1% up to very small scales. And in this work by Schneider and others in 2020, try to quantify what would be the error if we don't consider these baryons. So if we do consider baryons, we have these blue contours here. If we have perfect knowledge of the baryonic effects, if we ignore completely baryons, we would get these black contours. So these are 5 sigma bias in sigma 8, so in the amplitude of fluctuation in the universe, and in omega matter, the matter density. If we do consider baryonic effects, but we don't know the exact model, so we marginalize over them, we get these red contours, so we're gonna miss part of information, but still be unbiased. And if we do like a dark energy survey and just throw away all the small scales where these baryonic effects are more important, we throw away a lot of the information and we get these gray contours. So doing this model is very important. And here we propose to model them with the BCM, or baryon correction model, or also baryonification. This was an algorithm that was proposed first by Schneider and Tessier in 2015. And the idea is to model baryonic effects in post-processing on top of n-body simulations. So you run gravity-only n-body simulation, and afterward you put baryons. So before baryonification, you will have all your halos that can follow, for instance, a Navarro-Franke white, as we've seen before. It's just a normal parameterization for dark matter halos. Whereas after the baryonification, you introduce different components of baryons. For instance, you can introduce a central galaxy or an hydrostatic equilibrium gas, this red line. And you can assume that a fraction of the gas is expelled from the halos. That is like this part, this green line is the density profile of this ejected gas that is going beyond the viral radius. So you compute analytically these density profiles according to some theoretical prescription that will depend on some physically motivated parameters. And then after you compute this analytical profile, you displace the particles in the halos of your simulation to match these new profiles. So after you baryonify your simulation, you will have different baryonic fields in your simulation. As we can see in this plot, in the top left in the top left panel, you would see like the dark matter only simulation. That is before baryonification, but after baryonification, on top of the dark matter, you would have also some bound gas, some gas that reside inside halos, some part of the gas that is ejected from the halos, is this bottom right panel, whereas you will have also some galaxy field. And this baryonification is much quicker. We expect to run a full hydrodynamical simulation. So an hydrodynamical simulation can take millions of CPU hours, whereas to baryonify simulation, you can take few seconds up to 1 minute or so, depending on the size of your simulation. So this is very quick and accurate. But in order to be used, for instance, in an MCMC analysis with hundreds of thousands of evaluations, it is still slow. So what we propose to speed up this kind of analysis is to build emulators, and in this case with artificial neural network. So the scheme of this neural network is the following. You have like different layers. The first one is an input layer where you put as an input the cosmological parameters. The last one would be an output layer where you have, for instance, your matter power spectrum or the baryonic effects on the matter power spectrum. And in between, you have several hidden layers. So in each of the hidden layers, you have a number of neurons. And in each neurons, you will apply a nonlinear activation function. And all the neurons in each layer is fully connected to the neurons of the previous and the next layers. And in each of these connections, you will apply a weight. So what the network does is to minimize the weights in all the network. So to change, optimize the weights in the network to minimize a given function. So that is called the loss function. So you run a huge training set, so like some cosmological parameters for which the network knows your model, so the matter power spectrum given by your simulations with baryons. And then all these weights are minimized in order for the network to learn the mapping from the cosmological parameters and astrophysical parameters, in this case, to the matter power spectrum. So after we do the training on the network, we get some % accuracy on our network, and we can go and try to see how it performs our neural network against the hydrodynamical simulations. So we try to collect the largest set of hydrodynamical simulation we could get. So we get a set of 74 cosmological hydrodynamical simulation. So we use also Bahamas, Cosmoauls, Owls, Illustris, Illustris TNG, Eagle, and we try to fit them all. And using our full model of baryonification, there's 7 parameters. As you can see, we can get an accuracy of 1% in all their power spectra. And we try also to strip down our model to see like what's the minimum amount of baryonic parameters we need to describe this clustering. And we see that even with just 1 parameters, which is like the quantity of gas that is expelled from a characteristic halo mass, we see that still like we are a few percent accuracy to most of these hydrodynamical simulations. And
2 minutes, Giovanni.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, I'm done. Thanks. So, and we also published our neural network emulators that are available in this website. And just to conclude, baryonic physics is poorly known, and this is the dominant systematics expected in current and future weak lensing surveys. So we proposed here to model it with a baryon correction model. This to be applied on post-processing of gravity simulations, and then to train neural network emulators in order to speed up by order of magnitudes the analysis of the pipeline. And we see that this method is very, very fast. It's millisecond evaluation for one model, and still accurate enough to fit at percent level the very expensive hydrodynamical simulations. And thank you for the attention. And if you have any question, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Giovanni. You can take sure.
Hello, thank you for the talk. So I want to make a comment because you only mentioned the effects of baryonic feedback, but in colder matter, let's say cosmology. But for example, I mean, what I would like to hear in this kind of talks also is that these problems clearly degenerate with the assumption of the cosmology you are assuming, and also because you are a bit warmer kind of particles, you may release tension that is only paid by the baryonic feedback. Therefore, this problem has to be degenerate. And last comment is that, for example, in the case of the smaller structures, when stars are not produced in high ratios, and then baryonic feedback negligible respect to dark matter only. And we know that in these small scale galaxies, we have the tensions yet with cold dark matter, right? And baryonic feedback only cannot solve. So if you can comment on this last point, I will appreciate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the comments. I answer also a bit on the first point, which is totally on point. So the degeneracies between cosmological parameters and astrophysical parameters are there and are important to model. And actually, I didn't mention it just for reason of time, but in the approach I'm following, you have both modeling of cosmological and astrophysical parameters at the same time. So for the cosmology, we are using the cosmology scaling algorithm of Raul Angulo and Simon White 2010. So this is allows you to, in post-processing, to displace the particles of your simulation in order to follow the to mimic the cosmology of another set of simulation run within a different cosmological set. So you can effectively model the cosmology in post-processing in your simulations. And so we in our emulator, we are changing both cosmological parameter and astrophysical parameters and fully capture all the degeneracies between these two sets. As the second one, I agree, in the matter power spectrum, different halos contributes in different way in the matter power spectrum. But in our simulation, we are, so in the matter power spectrum, actually the halos that matter the most are halos of 10 to the 13 solar masses, 10 to the 14 solar masses. So, but with this baryonification approach, you parameterize the dependencies of the baryonic effects as a function of the Hello mass. So you should capture all these differences of baryonic effects in different Hello masses, even though they should be degenerate, of course.
Okay, thank you, Giovanni. Thank you, Johan.
Thank you very much.